Well, there have been many efforts to try and define non-financial reporting and how we go beyond simply looking at the financial aspects of a company in order to know what drives value, particularly financial value. And initially the term, the triple bottom line was coined, and that represented a focus on the traditional financial, environmental, social related issues. Companies like Novo Nordisk started pioneering the use of the triple bottom line. It was recognized that there was something missing, namely the health of employees. And so the idea was first coined, well, if we're going to add in another element, let's call it the fourth bottom line. I think what has happened since the term was introduced was a recognition that whatever additional reporting requirements you place need to be integrated into what we have already. Otherwise, it's going to get too complex and unwieldy. And so we are seeing that the measurement of health within a company report needs to be part of what is already an accepted way of measuring the health of the company overall beyond the non-financial reports. There are many advantages. The first is that what you don't know about and what you're not measuring, you're not going to act upon. And so I would suspect many companies have a better understanding about the plant and machinery that they use and when it's likely to wear out than they do about the health status of their employees, even though the health status of their employees is what drives productivity, morale, retention over the long term. And of course, in those companies that bear healthcare costs, they contribute enormously to healthcare costs. So many sitting in an audit committee may very well be aware of the large amounts being spent on healthcare costs or on absenteeism without having any insight into, can they reduce that? Can they prevent it? Are there actions that they can take? So the beauty of having health metrics for the company is first that it can take action to maximize the impact on their employees and ultimately on productivity. The impact for an investor is they get a more informed idea about, is this company in a healthy state for the long term? A company that's getting older, accumulating a lot of chronic diseases, may have a lot of mental health, is a company that you may not want to invest in compared to one that's starting to tackle those sort of things more aggressively. I think it's quite extraordinary that we have the ministers of health of the region getting behind a corporate initiative for two reasons. One is it's very rare in the World Health Organization realm to actually have this level of engagement with companies. But I think the history of HIV/AIDS in this part of the world has meant that they know that there's an intimate link between the way companies show leadership in addressing what has been a massive epidemic of HIV/AIDS and the response of governments and the impact on communities. So I think that why this part of the world is the place we're seeing it first is because they believe that if we can go from HIV/AIDS and the responsibility and leadership that companies showed there into other chronic diseases, maybe we will get on top of hypertension and diabetes and mental health in time, and it cannot be done by governments alone. We have some steps underway. So we are working with some of the leading companies around the world, many of the chief medical officers, folk who've thought about this deeply and were responsible for the occupational and health and safety metrics that we have today. So the process really is to comb through what really makes a difference. How can we actually synthesize these extremely long-wieldy lists that many would want down to something that's practical and pragmatic? I think what will come out is three clusters of measurements. Those that relate to the leadership and governance of a company for health, those that relate to the underlying risks, and those relate to the quality of the programs that make an impact. And I think in starting to get those together, we're already making a lot of progress. Some companies are already starting to report. I would suspect over the next 18-month period, we'll see a bit of experimentation, but hopefully then agreement by the major reporting bodies. So we know that the major drivers of chronic diseases relate to food and beverages, alcohol, tobacco, inactivity, and so on. And so it's interesting that there are examples of companies who publicly stated their intent both to transform and address this through their core products and services. This is separate from the employee issue. So examples would be Unilever, PepsiCo, Mars, all looking at product reformulation, lowering salt, sugar, and fat, not because they think it's just a jolly nice thing to do, but because they are reading the market and consumers seeing that long-term the demand for healthy foods is actually more profitable than less healthy foods. And at the same time, they can reduce their long-term litigation and liability concerns. The same we're seeing in some alcohol companies, where alcohol companies are aware that the issue of alcohol consumption and motor vehicle injuries is very high and very well known. So we're seeing some, AB InBev being the latest, bringing together a consortium of IBM, Facebook, unlikely partners to try and see how they can start addressing safe roads and safe driving. Again, not because they think this is a nice thing to do and want to be patted on the back, but because they believe that'll be a way of reducing their long-term risk. I mentioned Philip Morris International, very unlikely company to mention given what I've been involved with in tobacco control, but they have been investing up to $2 billion in preparing and reduced risk products that could bring down the risk of consumption of tobacco products by 95% plus. Their CEO just a couple of weeks ago announced that he would like to see by the end of the decade the majority of people using his products to be on reduced risk products, which would mean dramatic changes in the death rates from tobacco. All of those are examples of what is not coming tomorrow, but what is underway now. And it's driven, I think, by two big forces. One is the investor community starting to look at sustainability long-term. That includes liability risk and so on. But the second is consumer demand. And consumer demand is shifting much more aggressively to wanting to invest in companies that are truly supporting their long-term interest and welfare. It's often difficult when I come to South Africa for people in South Africa who are so bogged down in the daily tedium of everything to do with whether it's the politics of the day or the fact that the Japanese beat us in a red test match, that they're unable to lift their eyes and realize actually South Africa is a global leader in this space. The work of Mervyn King in integrated reporting is transforming the way we think about integrated reporting within the UN structures, within many of the stock exchanges of the world. Our own CEO, Adrian Gore, he's present at the Clinton Global Initiative on a platform with the World Health Organization Director General and Chelsea Clinton, was used to make it clear that health metrics and the measurement of health represents a fundamental way that companies and society can share a common vision of shared value. And it's the way that he wants us to go, and that's why we're moving as hard and fast as we can. Well, I really must applaud Nkonki for holding this meeting. It's extremely rare to actually have the ability to bring together accountants, chief financial officers, and those who are actually sitting at the heart of decision-making in companies talk about issues like health. And the power of doing that and having not the health person talk about health, but to actually have platforms when Nkonki's brought together, say, CFOs to talk about health, will translate into real action, since it's they who control the purse strings of companies and unfortunately not the health heads.